Hi guys, and welcome to this week's feature of My Grenada Moments with me, Nisha McIntyre, your host. This month is a very dynamic month and a very special month for women. It's Women's History Month. And so we've started off a series called Dynamic Women Features. And we're going to be looking at really influential, successful Grenadian women who are making a mark in their respective industries. And today, in celebration of International Women's Day, we are kicking it off with a very special fashion designer. And I have to tell you, this one really gives me chills because I am such a huge advocate of the creative arts and particularly fashion design. So having the privilege to speak to today's guest just gives me goosebumps thinking about it. She is no stranger now in mainstream media. She is in her 30s, drum roll anyone. She's had the privilege of dressing Jordan Sparks, Gabrielle Union, Beyoncé Knowles, and even former First Lady Michelle Obama. And if you haven't guessed it as yet, I am talking about Felisha Noel, who goes by the name of Faye Noel. Her brand has been doing some pretty significant things of late. I'm sure some of you would have seen her collaboration with Nike and LeBron, the strongest campaign in producing the LeBron 16 sneakers that sold out in like a hot second. She is a Grenadian by descent. She comes from the parish of St. Andrew. Her family comes from the parish of St. Andrew. And she is a daughter of the soil who loves the soil. And I think it's so fitting to say that, given that her most recent collection had that tagline, daughter of the soil. So today I'm really happy to be able to sit with Felisha and to discuss with her in detail her own growth and her own trajectory, moving from a relatively unknown young Grenadian girl with limited resources to now building this huge international brand that is very well received and supported by some of the biggest celebrities across the pond.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome. I always love to get a chance to tell my story in my own words. It's not a really traditional story. There's so many different layers to it, but I always try to make sure I'm very expressive of the journey that I've been on. So thank you for having me.
Perfect. We're going to cover quite a bit of topics today, but I really wanted to start with the one that hits home, Grenada. What is your love language with this island that you have come to appreciate and even to replicate in your work? What does Grenada really mean to you, and how do you see your heritage being a part of this journey and shaping you into becoming who you are?
I was born in New York. My mom came up here with me in her belly. She came to America to have me here. And so I was not born in Grenada. A lot of people ask me that, were you born there? They somehow equate that to I don't know what they equate it to, but I somehow get the feeling that they do equate it, like, well, were you born there? I was not born in Grenada. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Shortly after my mom had me, we went back to Grenada, but then we did come back here to live. My love language to Grenada has been everything what I said. I remember, and I just don't remember what age. We were always going back to Grenada. We spent the summers there. My grandmother still lives there. A lot of my family, my close relatives still live there, right? So we frequented Grenada. And I just remember I wasn't able to describe this feeling as a little girl, but every time I remember feeling at home, right? And not just when I got to Paraclete, where my grandmother was living, or when I got to Grenville, as soon as I would get off the plane, this feeling of belonging would consume me, right? I wouldn't until much later in my life and in my career know how to tap into that. But that is just the only way I knew how to describe it. I felt, and I could be even very frank and use words like, I remember being a teenager, going to school, in certain areas. I remember never feeling like the one that belonged, never feeling like the pretty one, never feeling these certain feelings. But in Grenada, I felt that. I always, and I make a joke and say I'm more beautiful when I'm in Grenada. And I always say that, and I would say that to my cousins, and they understood what I meant, right? It was like if something, even the way I feel about myself feels different, and did feel different when I was in Grenada. And till this day, I still have that feeling. So I have it, it's very personal, it's very innate. It's something that's inside of me. I wanted to think, it is because that is the birthplace of my mother and my father and my thing, but it's something else that's there for me. It's something else that really speaks to my spirit in Grenada. And it's hard for me to sometimes put it into words. And I say things, I sometimes just say like Grenada's a vibe, and it makes me feel this way, and it's intoxicating. And I use words like that because I still cannot fully describe what that love language is. I just know that it is one. I just know that it is a connection. I just know that deep down in my soul, I feel like a daughter of that soil. So I create these collections to express this love language and to express this feeling, and I'm pretty sure it's going to take my entire life to get it all out. um, but it really is almost like a love letter almost, and it's me honoring my heritage, but there's also something else there, that I can't quite put my finger on it. But I hope to, I hope one day it'll just reveal it'll reveal itself in a very clear and concise way.
I guess we'll see it in your collections bit by
Right.
bit. We'll get to see your own revelation each
Yeah.
season as you debut in your collections.
And
Um,
Nisha, I just want you to know before we continue, I'm being, I remember this morning I told myself, like, today I'm gonna be just super open with Nisha, just super vulnerable, super, just super like really just make people understand like who Fee Noel is, and just like all the things that make it up, right? Whether it's my crazy thoughts, or just I really wanted to do an interview where I can not just only show the highlights, but also what it takes and what it took to really develop, myself and my collections and my business and all that stuff. So you're gonna get the real deal.
You know, you've always been very frank about your family and the fact that their entrepreneurial spirit is what inspired you to be an entrepreneur. But really and truly, what do you think it is about being in that family, seeing your grandmother, your mother, your aunts, your uncles all operate their own businesses that truly made you feel that that had to be your default mechanism?
Wow, that's an amazing question. And I'm thinking about it as you're asking it. And the first thought that has come to me is, I built my brand, I built myself on the idea that you can create your life, right? Like, you can create the life that you want to live, and you can create the person that you want to be. And the reason being for that is because I'm so inspired by my family and what they have done. And when I say that I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, I mean, they had nothing, right? They just had just the simplest things that life has to offer. I remember my grandmother, that she was very, very poor, she was very poor, and she built herself up to be this proud woman, this well respected woman. They call her Teacher Sheila, where she taught and she's a storyteller, and she has created so much avenues to make a life for her children. And they then went on, and then not only that, she let go of them at such a young age, right? They started leaving Grenada, and she started sending them off at the age of like 17, 16. Like, I can't imagine what that must have felt like for her to say, I built you up enough, now I'm going to put you out into the world, and not the world of Grenada, a whole different world outside of that. And I want you to go and make it, and make something of yourself. And she had 9 children, and they all did just that. So I'm super inspired for many reasons. One, I can't even think about doing that now with all the resources that I have. And I have way more resources than they have. And I'm just, so that's what keeps me going. And I'm just like, wow, look at what they've come to do. And when I look at someone like my mom and my aunt, and how they helped each other and they worked together to really create this life where I can now dream the dream that I'm dreaming. And then I can now work towards something. And the thought of that is just almost like a fairy tale, right? Like, to me, that's a fairy tale. To me, that is where my inspiration comes from. And me knowing that story, and I remember the early days. I remember not having much. I remember working with what we have. I remember my mom working a job where she tried her best. And then I remember seeing her really turn her life around and become an entrepreneur. And it's not that her life wasn't good before, right? Because they also all have this thing, this like sort of humble spirit about them, where we make do with what we have, right? So, but it's just that she wanted to dream a bigger dream. And I bear witness to that. So that is where that comes from. That is why I say, like, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I come from a family of using what they have and turning it into something much larger than themselves, right? And really taking their place in the world, and doing these things so that myself, or now my son, or their children can just dream a new dream and carry on a legacy that started with the woman who decided, I'm going to be a hard worker, and I'm going to make sure that my children do the same and their children do the same. So I don't know if I went off on a tangent.
Talking, and your story is such a powerful one of resilience and perseverance. But as I listen to you, I'm curious to learn actually what was your own family's love language as it related to you and your passions. Would you say that you were sort of left to tough it out, or did you feel that you had the support? Did they carry you along the way?
So there's two folds to that. Because of the profession that I chose, they didn't believe in that. They didn't believe in the idea of fashion. They didn't believe in that as a respectable career. So I did have to tough it out, right? It took me a really long time to prove myself. And I kind of just had to really believe in what I was doing. And I don't really, like, something in me just wouldn't let me let fashion go, right? So I did have to tough it out in the sense that I kind of had to live 2 lives. Like, I had to go to the school that my mother wanted to go to, start do the profession that she wanted me to do, while at the same time on the side doing what I wanted to do. And it came a time where I had to make a choice. I was like, okay, I graduated, I got you a degree, I hope this makes everyone happy, but I can no longer, like, it is time for me to now take my path. So right now, I want to say, I do want to point out that I really was able to chase my dreams and not end up homeless on the street. Like, I had a bed to sleep in at night. I had, food on the table. So it wasn't as if it was like really like an in-between stage. Even though I was taking this path, I was also very privileged to be able to take that path, you know. So in that way, my mother was very supportive, you know, because I was still able to do what I was able to do without having to worry about um basic human living
Right.
things. So um I do want to say that if I had chosen something else, right, like maybe becoming a lawyer, a doctor, or some, and I'm not saying that those paths are easy, but I would have had maybe the support in the beginning, because for them that was like respectable and would make them proud. So I did have a tough time making believers out of my family, you know, and I don't regret any of it, of course, because it developed certain things inside of me that I'm going to need as I continue down this journey.
Awesome. And I think just your story can be so reminiscent of so many Grenadian stories, so many households with, especially creatives who would have felt the need to want to explore a creative passion, and we're told, you know, you have to do something more practical.
Exactly.
Exactly, you know, because that's not going to pay the bills. So, I mean, having individuals like yourself showing us that that is now possible, I think the narrative of parents, it's going to
Mhm.
start changing and has already started changing in terms of what they feel confident in letting their children go to school to study and what they themselves support.
So walk me through this whole process, that transition from Faye doing what my mother wants me to do to Felisha doing what Felisha wants to do. Because, you know, a lot of females, they have an interest in fashion. They love style, they love fashion, but it stops there. What made you feel like you had something inside of you that could make you excel at becoming a top fashion designer?
Man, it was a battle for me, because here I was in school, like just being a zombie, right? Like, let's be super clear. I was just really showing up there, thinking about fashion all the time, still building what I was building on the side while I was in college. And I believed in myself, and then I kind of didn't believe in myself. There was this there was this inner battle where there was something inside of me who said, "Go for it. You can do it." But then there's also, right on the other side, sort of planting doubts inside of me the whole time. And I've always had this duality where it's like, even if I don't think I'm good enough at this moment, I'm still going to move forward. And the feeling came from, one, not being able to go to fashion school, right? I'm in school for finance, so there was so many things about fashion that I didn't learn. And back then I thought like that was a bad thing, but actually that was the path that I was supposed to take, because I found out if I had went to fashion school, I probably wouldn't have been so fearless in starting a fashion company. A lot of people that go to fashion school, they get so bogged down with how hard it is that they never actually start their own company or start their own thing, or even just really pursue into a fashion career. So that was my saving grace, is I almost didn't know what it would take. So I didn't have the fear of if I can make it, right? It's not until I'm in it and I'm like, wow, this is really tough. This is really hard. And even though I had the doubts, and my family would be like, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. There was something else that's like, no, you can be the one to do this. You can make a life for yourself. And I believe that so deeply and so much that I went with that feeling. And even today, you know, you still have doubts. You're still, even, you know, I never want people to think that when you see certain successes and you see certain things happen, that that person no longer has doubt or no longer has feelings of, is it good? Is it, you know, like that feeling is still there, but you feel the fear and you do it anyway. And that is what I live by. Like, you feel the doubt and you do it anyway. You feel the fear and you do it anyway, because the some this was planted inside of you, right? It didn't come from anywhere. So there's something there that you're supposed to be fulfilling. So I still don't know if I really am using my finance degree or whatever I learned there. I still don't know what exactly that whole process taught me. Maybe it was discipline, maybe it was my ability to stick with something. I'm not sure. Because people say, well, if you did finance, you're using it in your business. And it's like, I'm still trying to figure that out, because you still have to get an accountant. You still have to get all those things. Like, I cannot be my own accountant. But I just, to just make it in just the shortest way possible, there is still something inside of me telling me, you can be this, you can be that. And I ride with that. I let it outweigh the you can't. And it's a choice.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's a choice that you choose. And I know so much people, they admire, like, wow, like, how did you? And I'm like, it's really not that super deep, right? Like, I made a choice, and I have to make the choice every day that I'm going to chase after this. And you made a choice. It's like, you know what? I may leave fashion. The ones that want to do fashion and they ended up not. I tell them, like, you made a choice to not go after it, but it's still a choice that you made. But if you did choose, you can be where I am too, or and further. Because what happens is, when you make that choice, everything conspires to go with that, because your whole being is making that choice. The feeling, the things you're putting out into the universe, your thoughts, all of that stuff makes that choice with you. And it sort of opens up your path where things would start to come. So if you ever notice, like, you learn a word and then you start seeing it everywhere, right? It's like the same thing. You make a choice and opportunities start to come your way to help you along this choice that you made. And you're just consistent. That's it. Like, being consistent with the choice that I made. For a long time, I did not want to call myself a fashion designer.
Once you made that decision within you that this is what you wanted to do and this is where you wanted to go, how did you start? Like, how did you go about learning about the mechanics of the industry, the sewing, understanding fabrics, understanding prints and the flow of garments? How did you navigate through that? And at what point in time did you become so comfortable with it that you then felt okay?
It really took me years. And the path that I took was, I hired people who did go to fashion school. I hired people who did have fashion knowledge. And what I did is, as they worked for me, and I remember, like, one of my very first, when I started my company, I started with a woman who was older than me. She went to school in Shanghai and she was coming to America, and she went to fashion school in Shanghai and she was coming to America, and her English, it was kind of hard to communicate. And I interviewed her and I said, well, I don't really have any money. And at the time she was like, well, I want to come to America and I want to work with someone. She interned for me for 3 months.
Mhm.
Doing patterns. So that was this is where I'm learning now, right? Because she went to fashion school. So I've learned from other people. I learned from watching them. I learned from working closely with her. And it was just us two. And I would have the idea of the design and she would bring it to life. And my whole path kind of went that way. I learned through long hours and trial and error. So it was really just me putting myself in it, right? Like, really engulfing myself in the process of garment, like creating a garment, and what are the next steps and what happens. And I've learned from people along the way that either had more knowledge than me, went to school for it. I'm like a sponge, and that was my path. And sort of my schooling was really just trial and error, going through the process, building while I was building the business, right? It was like I was everything was happening in the moment.
Now, everybody knows you have a very distinct personal brand. How did you arrive at that brand, and how has that influenced the company's brand as a whole?
So, they say all good things come with time. I've always had this certain flair about me. I'm really particular in what I like, what inspires me, right? There's certain things that really bring me to life, whether it's traveling, Grenada, beaches, the 70s era. Like there's things that that really truly excite me. And what I did was what I did with that was I translated that into my clothes. Like what do I like, right? What do I like to wear? How do I like to look? And I'm a fairy taleist. Like when I imagine my woman, I imagine where she's wearing it to. I imagine how she walks. I imagine how she's holding her glass, how she sits when she's wearing the clothes. I imagine all of that stuff as if the clothes has a life of its own. And through that, I've been able to develop this sort of edgy glamour, if you will, and along with like this effortless sort of leisure lounge. And the reason why I use these words and sensual, the reason why I use these words is because I think about how I want my woman to feel. And I think about what I want her to project to what other people feel when they see her. And I always think about that. And over time, I've been able to develop a feeling, a vibe, and something consistent in my clothes. So it didn't come right away. It came from, again, I'm going to use this word throughout the interview, just trial and error, right? There was a time where I was all over the place and couldn't hone in on what really made me smile. There was a time where I was just trying to create what I think other people would like. It's not until I sat down and I said, well, who is the Felisha Noel woman? What does she like to do? What does she like to wear? How does she like to feel? And create with that in mind. And a few years passed, and I started noticing what I was really good at, what really resonated with others, what I really loved. And not too long ago, probably just in 2018, really, I was able to hone in on that and discover and like say, okay, this right here, this right here is what Felisha Noel is. And I'm going to run with that. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So I really don't have a roadmap, but I just know I developed what that was that now resonates with other people, and they can call it out and spot it and see it.